Disclaimer: this story is a work of fiction created for emotional and entertainment purposes only. While it may draw inspiration from real-life situations, all characters, events, and details are products of imagination. Any resemblance to actual people, places, or events is purely coincidental. The narrative is intended for mature audiences in the USA who enjoy dramatic storytelling and should not be taken as a factual account. The morning sun peeked through the blinds, sending streaks of golden light across the living room floor. For once, I didn't have to rush out the door, fight traffic, or answer a flood of work emails before I'd even had coffee. Today was mine, just mine. No obligations, no deadlines, no phone calls that would weigh me down. I had promised myself a break, something I hadn't given myself in months. The plan was simple: spend the entire day by the pool, soaking in the warmth of summer, letting my thoughts drift away like the ripples across the water. I slipped into my favorite swimsuit, one I hadn't worn since last summer, and wrapped a light towel around my shoulders. As I stepped outside, the air was already warm, carrying that faint smell of sunscreen and blooming flowers that always reminded me of childhood vacations. The pool shimmered in the morning light, its surface like a sheet of glass, waiting to be disturbed. I set down a tray with iced lemonade, a half-read novel, and my phone, though I had promised myself I wouldn't touch it unless absolutely necessary. Sinking into the lounge chair, I let out a deep breath I didn't even know I'd been holding. The water sparkled, inviting me in, but for a moment, I just wanted to sit still and feel the sun on my skin. My life had been a whirlwind lately: late nights at the office, endless arguments with my partner about things that never seemed to get resolved, and the quiet loneliness that crept in even when I was surrounded by people. Here, though, none of that mattered. The pool was my escape, my sanctuary. I closed my eyes and listened. The soft rustle of leaves in the breeze. The faint hum of a neighbor's lawnmower in the distance. The occasional chirp of a bird perched on the fence. It was peaceful, almost too peaceful, and for a moment I wondered if I even remembered what true relaxation felt like. My body had been running on adrenaline and routine for so long that slowing down felt strange, almost guilty, as if I didn't deserve it. But I did. At least, I kept telling myself that. When I finally slipped into the pool, the cool water wrapped around me like a long-awaited embrace. I let myself float on my back, staring up at the endless blue sky, and for a fleeting moment, I felt weightless, free from expectations, free from responsibilities, free from everything that had been suffocating me. This was supposed to be the day I would recharge, the day I would find some piece of myself again. Little did I know, as the sun climbed higher and the shadows began to shift across the water, that this relaxing day would not stay peaceful for long. Something, or rather, someone, was about to arrive and change everything. I had just settled back onto the lounge chair, my skin still damp from the swim, when I heard it, the faint creak of the gate at the side of the house. My eyes fluttered open, and for a moment I thought I had imagined it. Nobody was supposed to be here. I had made sure of that. My partner was out for the day, and friends knew I wasn't hosting anyone. But then, the sound of footsteps echoed against the concrete, hesitant at first and then more deliberate. I sat up, clutching the edge of my towel. And then, there he was standing at the edge of the pool deck, looking slightly out of place yet oddly comfortable, as if he had every right to be there. It was Daniel, my neighbor from across the street. He was carrying a bottle of water and wearing a casual smile, the kind that suggested this wasn't the first time he had let himself wander over uninvited. "Hey," he said, with a casual nod, "I saw you out here and thought I'd say hello. Beautiful day, isn't it?" For a second, I hesitated. My first instinct was irritation. This was supposed to be my day, my quiet, uninterrupted escape. But his tone was easy, almost disarming, and I found myself softening. "Yeah, it is," I replied, gesturing vaguely toward the pool. "Just trying to relax a bit." He stepped closer, his eyes scanning the sparkling water before settling back on me. "Mind if I sit for a while?" he asked, already moving toward the empty chair beside mine. He didn't wait for a real answer, and before I could object, he had settled in, stretching his legs out like he belonged there. I told myself it was fine. It was just company. Maybe, in some strange way, it would be nice not to spend the entire day alone. Still, there was something about his sudden presence that unsettled me. Daniel wasn't just a neighbor. He was someone I had always kept at a polite distance. Too friendly at times. Too curious about my life. And yet, I didn't ask him to leave. We began talking, small talk at first, about the weather, about how the neighborhood felt quieter this summer. He laughed easily, and I found myself smiling despite my initial irritation. But there was an undercurrent to his words, a weight in the pauses between sentences, as if he was circling around something he wanted to say but couldn't quite bring himself to voice. The air seemed thicker now, the sun hotter, the lemonade sweeter than before. I sipped slowly, watching the way his eyes lingered on me longer than they should have. Something about this wasn't casual at all, and though a part of me wanted to ignore it, another part, the reckless, restless part of me that had been starved of attention, noticed. As the minutes stretched on, I began to realize that Daniel hadn't just stopped by to chat. He had come with something on his mind, something that would soon push this relaxing day into dangerous territory. The sun had shifted high overhead, warming the patio until the concrete almost burned against bare feet. Daniel leaned back in the lounge chair, his water bottle resting loosely in his hand, while I adjusted the towel around my shoulders. For a while, we sat in easy silence, the kind that feels harmless on the surface, but carries a quiet tension underneath. I could sense he was building up to something. His gaze lingered a little too long, his words trailed off too often, and every time our eyes met, I felt the weight of unspoken thoughts pressing between us. Finally, he cleared his throat, his voice breaking the hum of summer air. "You know," he began slowly, "I've been meaning to say something to you for a long time." I stiffened. My stomach tightened, though I didn't know why. "Oh," I asked cautiously, trying to keep my tone light. "What's that?" He let out a small laugh, one that didn't quite mask his nervousness. "I see you out here sometimes reading, swimming, just living your life. And I guess I always thought you seemed different from everyone else. Like you're carrying so much, but nobody notices." His words caught me off guard. For a moment, I didn't know how to respond. He wasn't wrong, I had been carrying more than I ever let on. But hearing it said aloud, especially from someone like Daniel, left me feeling exposed. "That's a strange thing to say," I murmured, my fingers tightening around the edge of my glass. "Strange, maybe," he admitted, his voice softer now, but true. He paused, leaning forward slightly, his elbows resting on his knees. "I notice. I've noticed for a long time. And it's not just that. I like you. More than I should." The words hung in the air like a stone dropped into still water, sending ripples through everything I had tried to keep calm. My heart stumbled in my chest, and I glanced away, suddenly hyper-aware of the closeness between us. He wasn't joking. His eyes, steady, unflinching, told me he meant every word. I swallowed hard, the taste of lemonade suddenly too sharp on my tongue. "Daniel," I whispered, struggling to find the right words, "you can't say things like that." "Why not?" His question was gentle, almost pleading. "I know it's complicated, but I couldn't sit here and keep pretending I don't feel it. Every time I see you, it's there. You deserve someone who sees you, who actually pays attention." I felt heat rising in my face, a mix of anger, confusion, and something far more dangerous, curiosity. For so long, I had been starved of real attention, of being seen beyond the roles I played, the partner, the worker, the responsible one. Now here it was, right in front of me, forbidden and reckless, yet achingly tempting. I wanted to tell him to leave, to shut the gate behind him and never bring this up again. But instead, I sat frozen, unable to push away the intensity of his gaze. In that moment, I realized this day had shifted into something I could no longer control. What had started as a relaxing escape was now a storm brewing at the edge of the pool. I should have ended the conversation right there. I should have stood up, told Daniel this was inappropriate, and walked back inside. But I didn't. Instead, I sat there, silent, my pulse drumming in my ears while his confession echoed over and over in my head. His words, simple yet heavy, had cracked something open in me, something I didn't even realize I had been suppressing. The loneliness, The arguments at home, the exhaustion of being everything for everyone but nothing for myself, it all suddenly felt exposed under his gaze. Daniel leaned back in his chair, studying me carefully as if waiting for a reaction. "You don't have to say anything," he said finally, his voice quiet but steady. "I just needed you to know." But silence wasn't neutral. It was permission, or at least that's how it felt. I looked down at the pool, its once bright blue now reflecting a deeper shade as the sun shifted. My reflection stared back at me, fractured by ripples, and I didn't recognize the woman looking up. She looked vulnerable, tempted. To break the tension, I reached for my book, flipping through pages I didn't actually read. Daniel chuckled softly. "You don't have to pretend," he murmured. His words sent a shiver down my spine. "I can see it, you feel it too, don't you?" I should have denied it. I should have laughed it off. But my throat felt tight, and the truth lingered dangerously close to the surface. Instead of answering, I set the book aside and slipped back into the pool, hoping the water would cool the heat that had started to rise inside me. He watched me swim, his eyes following every movement. Normally, I would have felt self-conscious, maybe even irritated, but instead I felt something different, a strange thrill, as though his attention filled an emptiness I hadn't realized was so deep. When I surfaced, brushing my wet hair from my face, I saw him still watching, unashamed, and I didn't look away. "Come in," I said without thinking, the words escaping before I could stop them. My heart lurched as soon as I heard myself. It wasn't an invitation to swim, it was something else, something unspoken. Daniel hesitated, searching my face, then slowly stood, slipping off his shoes. He walked to the edge of the pool, crouching down so close I could see the flecks of green in his eyes. "Are you sure?" he asked softly, his hand hovering just above the water. I didn't answer, but I didn't move away either. My silence again betrayed me. The lines between what was safe and what was dangerous blurred until I couldn't tell them apart anymore. The pool, once my sanctuary, now felt like the edge of a cliff, one step closer and everything would change. As Daniel's fingers finally brushed the surface of the water, sending ripples dancing around me, I realized I was standing at a precipice. The day I thought would bring me peace was slowly unraveling into something I couldn't stop, even if I wanted to. The moment his fingers touched the water, the air between us seemed to shift. It was no longer just a quiet afternoon by the pool, it was charged, humming with an energy that made my skin prickle. I floated closer, drawn in despite every rational thought screaming at me to stop. Daniel's hand lingered just above the surface, waiting, almost asking for permission without words. And though I should have swum the other way, I didn't. When I reached the edge, he extended his hand to help me out. My palm slid into his, warm and firm, and the jolt that passed between us felt like more than simple contact. As he pulled me up, my body brushed against his, wet skin against dry fabric, and the closeness made my breath hitch. For a split second, I saw hesitation flicker in his eyes, as if he knew we had already crossed into dangerous territory. But then his thumb brushed against the back of my hand, deliberate and slow, and the hesitation was gone. I should have pulled away. I should have laughed, pretended it meant nothing, and put the wall back up. But instead, I froze, staring at him as the weight of the moment pressed down on us. The sounds of summer, the rustle of leaves, the hum of cicadas, even the splash of water lapping at the pool's edge, faded into the background. All I could hear was my own heartbeat and the faint rhythm of his breath. "You don't have to keep pretending," Daniel said softly, his voice low, almost a whisper. "I see it in your eyes. You feel this too." His words pierced through the thin veil of denial I had been clinging to. Maybe it was the loneliness that had hollowed me out for months, or the constant arguments at home that left me drained, unseen, unheard. Maybe it was the thrill of being wanted, of being noticed in a way I hadn't felt in so long. Whatever it was, it pulled me toward him like gravity, relentless and undeniable. When his hand slid from mine to my arm, the touch lingered, searing against my skin. His fingers traced upward, slow and careful, as though giving me time to push him away. I didn't. Instead, I stood still, trembling, caught between fear and desire. The first real boundary shattered when he leaned in, his face only inches from mine. I could feel the warmth of his breath, smell the faint trace of mint lingering on it. My mind screamed for me to step back, to end this before it went any further. But my body betrayed me. I didn't move. And then it happened. His lips brushed mine, not forceful, not demanding, but tentative, almost questioning. A spark ignited, one I hadn't felt in years, and for a moment, I let myself drown in it. It was reckless. It was wrong. But it was real. The pool behind us shimmered under the sun, a cruel reminder of the peaceful day I had promised myself. Yet here I was, standing on the edge of a mistake that could unravel everything. The line between right and wrong wasn't blurred anymore. It was gone, erased completely the moment I let him in. The world seemed to hold its breath after that kiss. For a few heartbeats, nothing existed except the press of his lips, the warmth of his hand still resting against my arm, and the dizzying rush in my chest. But reality has a cruel way of crashing back in. The sound of the back gate creaking open sliced through the stillness like a blade. I jerked back instantly, nearly stumbling into the lounge chair behind me. Daniel straightened, his jaw tightening as we both turned toward the noise. My heart pounded as I saw who it was, my partner. He stepped onto the patio, holding a grocery bag in one hand, his brow furrowed as he took in the scene, Daniel standing far too close to me, my damp hair clinging to my shoulders, my flushed face betraying emotions I hadn't meant for anyone to see. For a split second, I hoped maybe it didn't look as bad as it felt. Maybe he hadn't noticed the way my chest still rose and fell too quickly, or the tension hanging heavy between us. But his eyes narrowed, sharp and questioning, and I knew he had sensed something. "Daniel?" he asked, his tone clipped, suspicion already threading through the single word. "What are you doing here?" Daniel cleared his throat, forcing a casual smile. "Just stopping by to say hello. It's such a nice day, thought I'd sit for a while." It was a flimsy excuse, and we all knew it. My partner's gaze shifted to me, searching my face, waiting for an explanation that could erase the doubt forming in his mind. My lips parted, but no words came out. The guilt weighed down on me like wet concrete, pinning me in place. "Is that so?" he said finally, his voice colder now. He set the bag down on the patio table with a thud that made me flinch. "Well, thanks for checking in, Daniel. But I think we've got it handled here." The dismissal was clear, but Daniel lingered for a beat too long, his eyes flicking toward me as if he wanted to say something more. Finally, he nodded and muttered a quick goodbye before slipping out through the gate. The silence that followed was deafening. I tried to breathe, to think of something, anything, that would smooth over the tension. But my partner was already watching me, his expression hard. "Why was he here, really?" he asked, his voice low but sharp enough to cut. The question hit me like a slap. He knew. Maybe not the details, not the kiss, but he knew something wasn't right. My throat tightened, my mind scrambling for an answer that wouldn't unravel everything. But even as I tried to form words, the truth hung heavy in the air between us, undeniable and suffocating. The relaxing day I had promised myself was gone. In its place was a storm I couldn't outrun, the consequences of a single choice already beginning to surface, threatening to expose everything I had tried to keep hidden. The silence that followed Daniel's exit was unbearable. I could hear the faint splash of water against the pool's edge, the hum of insects in the air, even the crinkle of the grocery bag sitting untouched on the table. But the loudest sound was my own heartbeat, thundering in my ears as my partner's eyes stayed locked on me. "Tell me the truth," he said finally, his voice low, controlled, but the kind of controlled that was more dangerous than shouting. Why was he really here? I opened my mouth, closed it again, and felt my throat dry up. My instinct was to deny, to brush it off, to pretend Daniel's visit was meaningless. But the weight of guilt pressing on my chest made lying almost impossible. He just stopped by," I whispered, the words sounding weak even to my own ears. My partner took a step closer, his eyes narrowing. "Don't do that. Don't stand there and insult me with half answers. I know what I saw." His tone, his stare, it shattered the fragile walls I'd been trying to hold up. My composure cracked, and tears stung my eyes before I could stop them. "I didn't mean for it to happen," I admitted, my voice trembling. He said things I haven't heard in so long. And I let myself. I let myself feel something I shouldn't have. The confession hung heavy between us, raw and unpolished. His face hardened, jaw clenched so tightly I thought it might break. "So you're telling me it did happen," he said, his words sharp, each one cutting like glass. I shook my head desperately, trying to explain. It was just a moment. I didn't plan it. I didn't want it to happen. I swear I didn't. But for 1 second, I stopped, unable to finish the sentence. Saying it out loud would make it too real, too damning. His eyes searched mine, and what I saw there, hurt, betrayal, disbelief, was worse than any anger he could have shown me. "Do you even realize what you've done?" he asked, his voice breaking, just slightly. "Do you realize what this does to us?" The tears spilled over now, sliding hot down my cheeks. "I know," I whispered, my voice barely audible. "I know I messed up. I didn't mean to. It was supposed to be a simple day. Just me, the pool, some quiet." And then he came, and everything spun out of control. He shook his head, stepping back as if the distance might shield him from the pain. "Spun out of control," he repeated bitterly. "No. You made a choice. You crossed a line. And I don't know if we can come back from that." The breaking point had arrived. Whatever thin thread held us together was fraying right in front of me, and I felt powerless to stop it. The pool shimmered beside us, mocking me with its false calm, while my entire world threatened to collapse in its reflection. The rest of that afternoon passed in fragments, each moment blurring into the next. My partner didn't yell, didn't throw anything, didn't storm out the way I half expected him to. Instead, he moved through the patio in silence, collecting the groceries, setting them inside, leaving me standing there with my guilt echoing louder than any fight could. The silence was worse than anger. It was final, heavy, a wall I didn't know how to break through. I sat at the edge of the pool, my feet dangling in the water, staring at the ripples spreading across the surface. Hours ago, this pool had been my sanctuary. I had planned for peace, for stillness, for a rare moment of escape from the chaos of life. Now, every ripple reminded me of the choices I had made, of the kiss that shattered the calm and turned it into something I would never be able to erase. Inside the house, I could hear the faint sound of cabinets opening and closing, the refrigerator door shutting, drawers being pulled too roughly. Each sound was a reminder that he was still here, but so far away from me, further than he had ever been. I wanted to go to him, to explain again, to beg for forgiveness. But what could I say that hadn't already been said? Words wouldn't change the truth. By evening, the sun dipped low, casting long shadows across the water. I finally went inside, my body heavy as though carrying stones. He sat at the kitchen table, his head in his hands. When he looked up at me, his eyes were red, tired, broken. "I don't know what happens next," he said quietly. "I don't know if I can ever trust you again." His words carved into me, sharper than any scream. I nodded, because I knew he was right. Trust wasn't something you could patch up in a single conversation. It was fragile, and once cracked, it never looked the same again. That night, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, the silence between us louder than thunder. Every choice, every hesitation, every second I hadn't stopped what happened replayed in my mind like a cruel loop. I had gone looking for peace, and instead, I had found a storm that would follow me long after the sun rose again. It was supposed to be just a relaxing day by the pool. Just me, the water, and the chance to breathe. But life has a way of unraveling when you least expect it. One uninvited guest, one careless silence, one stolen kiss, and everything I thought was steady in my life came crashing down. As I closed my eyes, I realized I would remember this day forever. Not for the sun on my skin or the cool embrace of the water, but for the moment everything changed. The poolside wasn't a sanctuary anymore. It was the place where my life split into two, before and after. And nothing would ever be the same again. 3.